Hello, fellow innovators. This is Patrick Emmons.
And this is Shelli Nelson.
Welcome to the Innovation and the Digital Enterprise Podcast, where we interview successful visionaries and leaders, giving you an insight into how they drive and support innovation within their organizations. Today, we're welcoming Steve Caudill to the show. Steve is the Chief Technology Officer at Rand McNally. Before joining Rand McNally, Steve was a director at CNH Industrial, where he was responsible for delivering the farm operations and fleet management components of CNH's connected offering. Steve is the author of A Hero Behind Every Tree, The Non-Technical Reasons Your IT Investments Fail. He graduated from the University of Maryland with a BA in Comp Sci and graduated from the Naveen Jindal School of Management at University of Texas, Dallas. He's originally from Maryland, and most of his degree was completed outside the U.S. in Germany. And hopefully we'll be able to touch on that a little bit as we go on. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here.
Steve, can you share with our listeners a little bit more about your role at Rand McNally?
Sure. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer, which means all the products that we make from a technical perspective fall into my group. So we're the makers of cool things. That's mostly in long-haul fleet space. So compliance applications, electronic compliance devices, headsets, navigation units, a whole bunch of stuff to help long-haul truckers get where they're going. And we're in the middle of making some new products in the safety space that will also be useful for local fleets. So lots of fleet-related technology that's all pretty cool. Rand McNally is the longtime maker of maps. Anybody who's my age has had a Rand McNally Atlas in their car back in the day before there was Google. And so we've got a huge tradition in all those kinds of things, but my focus is on the technical products that we make.
That's a bit of like your history and your background is bringing that type of high-performing software organization to different companies. That's what you've kind of made your that's what you've done historically with most of the organizations when you that's the type of opportunities you're looking for, correct?
Yeah, that's long been my thing since way back. So I've been doing this almost 40 years now. So the whole adventure of going from chaos to, okay, we need to become an engineering discipline to, all right, well, that's very nice, but it's more craftsmanship. So how do we deal with that? And the invention of Agile and case tools and all kind of crazy things throughout the kind of history of how we make products, mostly with software. I've been part of that whole journey and have loved it. So getting into organizations to say, okay, this is how you go from, not performing terribly well to really getting an engineering organization to do great stuff and to make cool products. That's always something I'm out looking to do.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit more about talent? As we all know, this market is one that we've not seen in a very long time. So how do you approach that from an engineering perspective?
So it's tricky. I mean, right now there's lots of opportunities and not so many people to fill them all, and a lot of folks making moves and what have you. And it's it's a little crazy in trying to find the right folks. But the ticket is, if you're making good stuff and you can help engineers really connect to, I'm making a difference. Here's the things that happen when I do this work. I'm not one voice in 1,000 engineers that, it isn't having an impact. But here's what I do. Here's the results. Here's what happens with customers. Here's feedback from the field on stuff that I actually made. That's really attractive and get you the right kind of product makers. So now I use that as a lever to try to draw folks in, and then with good processes and good teams to say, hey, you can pair program. We're going to do test-driven development. We're going to use some things that are, kind of the right way of going after it. And then, do that well, not just, okay, we say we do X, Y, and Z, but it's really just old style waterfall. And, now we're doing that in, 1 week chunks. But actually, using those methods, then, folks learn something, they get to puff up their resume a bit. What I tell my teams is what I'd like you to have is the hottest resume on LinkedIn, and then be having so much fun that when you get calls, because you will, you say, no, this is what I got is too good. So, making that the goal, all right, doesn't mean I always hit it. But that, helps folks when you're trying to draw somebody in to say, if you really want to make some improvements in both your career and your skills, as well as have an impact on products, you should join our team.
So Steve, we all know that it's kind of slim pickings out there when it comes to talent, right? It's a very big challenge. And I think, you mentioned you've been around since Case Tools, and I remember those and the promises of other things. And
Right.
But so this isn't the first time we've seen this type of talent drought. What pools are you fishing in? Where do you conceptually, what are you thinking about when it comes to like finding right people, right seat? As you mentioned, finding the right cultural fit's a really important component. So I guess are you looking locally here in Chicago? Are you looking externally? What's your perspective?
Yeah, so we're mostly local to Chicago, but we're a bit of the world's oldest startup. So there's a lot of change we're trying to make in the organization. We've been around 165 years and has cool old paper products with a lot of innovation that go way back. But the engineering organization wasn't treated very well prior to me joining the company. And some of my work is to turn that around. And so from a product development standpoint, we've got a bit of a feel like a startup, but we have a solid brand and a lot of good products and those kind of things. So we can be attractive to I want to get into something new and make the cool hotness or what have you. But from my perspective, the best thing to do is get a lot of diversity, right? You want young talent, you want non-traditional educations, you want folks that came from different places, you want old school guys that been there and done that, and bring all of those folks together gets you just a lot more interesting team. And so then when somebody comes in to interview, assuming you can get them to at least take your call, the folks that they're talking to is a wide assortment of people with a bunch of different perspectives, and not just, okay, everybody's got to be a cookie cutter and you have to fit in a certain way. We just took a gentleman who was in our QA organization, who we didn't really know had a background actually in trucking. That's kind of what attracted him to the company in the first place, but he was doing, testing. And he, showed up and said, hey, I've got a list of things I think would be really cool product ideas. And I'm like, we got a product owner position open. He's like, you do? Well, what does a product owner do? I'm like, okay, if you want to learn what a product owner does, I think we got a spot for you. And he's hungry and he's experienced, but not old and crusty, and is actually a really, really awesome fit. And the engineering team is now excited because they've got somebody who's really been there and done that. And so it's just, any kind of find can be a good one if you kind of figure out what they're made of and if they want to make some products.
That's so interesting, especially from like an interviewing perspective. So how do you maybe involve the engineers in the interview process? And since you're kind of changing expectations or maybe looking at talent in a different way, how do you help the team through that, when they're talking to candidates?
Right. So we're pretty much an XP shop. So pairing is a part of what we do. We don't, pair 100% of the time, but lots of pairing goes on. So we use that process in our interview process. So, candidate's going to, get kind of the pre-check to make sure, are you really interested in this? This is what we got. This is how the teams work. And, it's your opportunity to say, thanks, but no thanks. But if you're interested, then the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to pair up with some of our engineers and just walk through an exercise. It's not really a check your skills kind of thing. It's mostly can you work together with us? Can we solve a problem on our feet? How do you think? And is that an add to the group? And how do we think? And does that make sense to you? And so they'll spend, probably an hour just kind of working an exercise together, and then just kind of have a chat on how that worked and, kind of a mini retrospective, right? Are you going to be able to join us and, help the team improve as we go forward, find problems that we need to solve and and help with answers to how we'll tackle that in the next sprint kind of thing. So it's a really awesome way to figure out, is this person a fit, but also a good way for them to see the other members of the team doing the same thing. Right? If you're the only person who brings your brain to work, you probably don't want to join that organization. So it's good to see everybody else doing it, and not just it's a panel and you've got to prove how smart you are.
I think one of the challenges that we're all seeing is sometimes unrealistic expectations in salaries right now. Is that something that you're seeing as well?
Wow, it's a little crazy. I went through the 90s, so it's not my first big salary increases. As a beneficiary of some of that when I was younger.
Right.
But we've got fresh outs asking for senior level salaries, and I'm like, somebody might pay that, but you're going to have trouble being worth that.
Right.
I don't mind that salaries go up. It's actually great news for people who want to be in tech. You can get into this industry, you can earn way more than a living wage. You can go in a variety of places, and that's awesome. But there's also okay, that's a little kooky, and no, we're not really going to start you at that. So I've had to pass on some folks just because they were just so kind of outside the sphere of kind of reasonable next steps. And I think we'll kind of settle on new sets of salary ranges as we kind of get through this spike of everybody needs somebody and there's not quite enough supply for the demand. So I don't mind that part, but there's certainly some folks that are kind of a little too much. So we've had to say, I'm not such a big organization, I could just pay anybody anything.
Yeah, I think there's the Googleification of salaries of like, hey, they're paying this. Like, yes, they organizationally that they can do
right.
that.
And they're Google. So
right,
and the rest of us aren't.
Right.
Yeah,
we don't
printing
print
money.
That's right. So one of the things that in our previous conversations that I really appreciate is, attracting the right people for you is tied to how you want to build products, right? So you're attracting the right people, incentivizing them by being part of a team that really is focused on pushing out functionality, being very much a value focused organization. I'd really like you to share more about like how those two are interrelated, right? Finding the right people and what you think is, you believe is one of your critical value positions to the business, which is your ability to develop products quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is we've got to have folks who that's what they want to do, right? I want to make stuff that has an impact. I don't want to just solve a tricky problem. There's plenty of really awesome, kind of corporate IT people that manage the infrastructure and keep the business systems running. And those are all great. But what I need is people who want to make a thing. And then, our job is to deliver value to the organization and to our customers. So we build in the feedback loops. I mean, part of how we execute Agile and XP is really lots of organizational and customer feedback. We have very, very short sprints. We get the developers engaged in actually hearing from stakeholders, actually going to customers, being involved in the testing process. My concept for these teams is that they own their product full stack from birth to death. So, if it's going to drag on for years and be a legacy product, well, guess what? Still your legacy product. And, if it's making money, that's awesome. If customers are unhappy, figure out how to fix it. If customers are happy, figure out how to give them more of that. So that there's a lot of feedback loops from the market and the customers. We work very closely with our product management organization that helps us see what we need to do next. But also very tightly with the sales and the support organizations to say, well, what do we got going on now? And how do we make sure we're making that something that people really want to have every day? So that's a kind of huge part of how the teams function is they're really focused on their thing they make.
And I think I personally, when I was an engineer, love the feedback loop, right? Like, am I doing the right things? But I also know that that's not something that's genuinely shared by a lot of people with an engineering background, that being that close to that feedback loop of the customer, is that something you're looking for during the interview process? Is that something that, because I having hired very similar people as a consulting firm, right? Obviously, you're going to be talking to human beings, and some
Right.
people like it. Some people prefer other things. I guess the nice way to put it. Is that something like when you're interviewing that you're selling that? Are you trying to find out? Is it because I would imagine there's a lot of people who just haven't had experience with it and they don't know if they like it or not. Is that what are your thoughts
Right.
about that?
Right. So, for the folks that do know, it's pretty easy to ferret that out. So in screening interview, it's just straight up front. This is what we're looking for. Talk to me about whether or not that excites you. Tell me about what is a really awesome day at work, right? You want to get up, get your coffee down and go to work as fast as possible, right? What's that look like? Or, okay, the alternative, I really want to call in sick today, or maybe call in dead and never show up again. What does that look like? That kind of gives you a feel for, right, where's their passion, where's their focus. But you had a good point in, folks who haven't done that before, well, they don't know for sure, right? I haven't done it. So really the deal is describing, you're going to own this with your team. Do you want to try that? And we're happy to have a, no harm, no foul. If you're not a fit, we will help you get your next thing. We'll be more than happy to give you a recommendation and you learned something, and that's awesome. But if you aren't willing to try, well, then we shouldn't even start. And so, we can have a conversation around here's how a team functions. If that seems attractive, but you haven't done it before, so you don't know, that's okay. Jump in, let's give it a run. And we think it'll actually be attractive. Most folks, once they're playing with a team who all is focused that way, they like being on a team that wants to figure out how to win. And and there's a great satisfaction in getting a patent for something people really use, or having a customer call in and say, "Wow, you made a huge difference in my business this week." It's like, wow, okay, I'll take more of that, please. So, generally we find folks do fit, but occasionally you get one that doesn't. And it's like, hey, you're not really gelling with this way of thinking. So let's work on an appropriate exit.
So last time we chatted with you, you mentioned you weren't looking to hire fully remote. So help us understand that more, because as you well know, a lot of candidates are just looking for that 100% remote position.
Yep. And that's the little bit of an organizational challenge right now, because we're turning around the engineering organization. One of the kind of key focuses from the leadership team is we got to get to know each other. We got to be together a bit. You've got to get to know the rest of the organization. And so while, the world is going fully remote, we're a bit of the outlier in, all right, we got to have some work in the office. And, so we're, looking at local. And Chicago is a great area for looking for tech talent locally, but it's also a tricky time. Everybody else is looking for tech talent. I just read an article where John Deere, a former competitor of CNH, is opening up a downtown tech office. Okay, well, that's going to draw a lot of connected vehicle talent, and I'm in the pool looking for connected vehicle talent. So there's plenty of challenges, but we are looking local. We like our teams to be together enough to get to know each other, and then working remotely is a lot more effective. Certainly spent a lot of time during the pandemic working remotely myself and with remote teams, and it was, definitely it works, right? So I'm certainly not, disparaging that at all, but we're trying to build a team that's brand new and a lot of new products and a lot of new spaces, turn things around. So that, makes it a little tougher. We've got to find folks who are willing to get together, and, then we try to be safe and make sure we're addressing the kind of current challenges that are out there. But that's a big part of how we're trying to form these teams.
Yeah, definitely. I think remote, not remote, right? There's so many challenges. And I think it's going to be, one of the things you touched on before was like the appreciation component of being that close to the customer, of like really getting that feedback. There's also the, do you bring the product team in when the news isn't great as well, right? Where it's like,
oh yeah. Oh yeah. So
is there,
yeah.
what is it? Why? I think I know why you do that, but I'd love to hear your ideas about why you do that.
Well, a lot of it is taking ownership for what you make. So, the first thing, when I joined the organization, we had some unhappy customers. And previous leadership, would just say, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I said, get me on the phone with the customers, right? Bring me into the calls, not just the sales team or just the marketing team or whoever. Let's get the tech guys saying, hey, I have a thing. It's not doing what you want. Here's the steps I'm taking to get it to do what you want, or, here's all alternatives. And you can call me, I'm owning this product. And then, the team sees that and says, hey, well, we need to own that product. Well, great, because the next time you're going to be on the phone with a customer. And I don't necessarily, want engineering making product decisions or, promising things to customers, but I want them to hear what the customer has to say about their products. I love it to take folks in the field. A lot of our testing group is very hands-on. And so if we have an opportunity, we'll go to a customer's location. We'll see how their stuff is working. We may, swap out some gear or, add some test configurations to see how it really works in the field. And if I can take an engineer that's on that product team along with them, perfect. Because they see how the operation works, they get the feedback, they go, oh, this is what the customer's dealing with. I can see how they may be unhappy with this particular feature or the way this thing works, or how long it stays alive, or whatever it is that the customer's got an issue with. And now they're coming back to the team saying, okay, here, I see what product wants, I see what sales wants, I see what the customer wants. Let me give you some engineering options that we might be able to tie all that together. And that's the kind of thinking real product makers need to have.
Awesome. Yeah. Oh, and with that mindset, the other part, like, as we touched on, XP, right? Extreme programming philosophies and approaches. And I think it's great to pair programming, short sprints, test-driven development, engaging product owners, engaging the business side of the house. Sometimes that creates its own challenge of, like, how do we get them to participate in such a very much collaborative, holding hands with each other, kind of like you're in it, right? What are some of the things that you do to get buy-in from the business side when you're moving to an organization at times and you're trying to, like, recharge them and get them to start adhering to these, SaaS level software engineering methodologies, right?
Right.
What are some of the things that you have to do to get buy-in from other parts of the organization?
Well, from the get-go, this is, the chief technology leader's job, right, is to get his or her peers playing, and making things go in these ways. So, first thing I tell everybody is my job is to get my peers involved and their teams involved. I'm not going to pass it on to you. So first off, we got to, ownership at the top level. And then, the day I walked in, I said, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to do things different in engineering. That's why you brought me in. So, you need to at least try some of these ideas, right? We could stop and go, hey, this is not working. That's fine. But we're not going to step in and play ball. That's not fine. So be forewarned, I'm going to bring you some new things to try. And then, we use those things that we know are engaging and effective. We started working on a new product and brought in marketing and sales and supply chain to say, okay, we're going to do a brainstorm on a thin slice. Oh, what's a thin slice? Well, we do these really, really short sprints. So we need to make the smallest possible thing that would deliver value. Well, okay, well, we want to make a this. All right, well, that's the ocean. So let's make it smaller. Okay, so a little discussion. Okay, that's the Indian Ocean. It's still an ocean. It's a smaller ocean,
Pacific,
but it's still an ocean.
right? Exactly.
Right. So, and we just kept slicing it down until they said, well, okay, here would be a thing. I said, all right, well, that has a technical risk. So our first thing is to go solve that technical risk, and we'll show you that it works. Okay, great. And then the next thing we have is a product market fit risk. So then we need you to take it to customers and see if your idea really is something they're going to be interested in. Okay, so we do our piece, and in a week they're looking at a prototype demo of solving the technical risk, and wow, that's like almost a product. I said, now wait, time out.
Right,
There's
exactly.
a long way between this and a product.
Right.
But what we did was we found the biggest problem, we made it as small as we could, and we proved we could solve it. So now we got a bunch more of that work to do. But guess what? Next sprint, okay, we're showing them, here's the materials, here's a clickable prototype, here's some, a journey map. You need to take that to the customer and say, if I make something like this, I think it's valuable. What do you think? and tell me which parts of this you think are most valuable, and how would you twist it a little bit to get better value in your organization.
And what parts
So
do you
now,
hate?
right. And so now they're engaged in the feedback loop before we ever write a line of code.
Totally.
And as we get those products to market and they have fit right away, right? They don't have a bunch of technical things we didn't get right. We aren't carrying a ton of tech debt because we made bad decisions. We already have asked the customers whether or not this is a fit. We've shown them different ways of working. They've been through this whole process. Well, then people want to buy it, right? Because it does things that are valuable to them. Instead of, well, we made a thing and now we have to go sell really hard.
Right.
So it takes some practice. If you can get the team to practice through one of these things all the way to getting it into the hands of customers, they're going to find it's really worth it. And so, now they want to get their teams involved. Now, how many more products can we do this with? So it takes some work. I mean, it's organizational change is never easy. But the whole making this really fast and spin often, the whole iterative thing, the better you do that, the more participation you're going to get because they're going to see results.
And the more the engineers actually know the customers, which is a critical thing. Big fan growing up of This Old House. And one of the things they always advocated for was measure twice, cut once. And that methodology that you espoused is what I always thought was exactly that in technology.
Absolutely.
Let's measure twice. The second we bring in the developers, things are going to get real expensive around here. Right. So, we don't have, luckily we don't have to buy wood considering it's 5 times the price of, it used to be. But our time on the developers, right? Like that whole rework, rethink, right? I used to call it back in the day when we used to do like the big yield requirements doc that nobody read. And then we updated,
Right.
Nobody read the updates. Then we did another update. Nobody read those. By the end, nobody really knows what we're doing. And then you do like a 4-month, hey, let's go get it started. And then you'd have the meeting where you would present it. And I used to call that the heartbreak meeting.
Right.
Because, you realize 50% of your money was gone and then you only got 50% of the functionality you wanted. So it was really a very, very disappointing moment for everybody. And so, the phrase like, I see what you thought I meant became just like my nightmare. Right. So that's where I agree with you, like that short circuiting that of like, let's not worry about the building. And some people advocate to not actually start building something until somebody's actually given you money for it, where you've said, hey, we're building this. We want you to commit to buying it. You're going to get the intro rate. For a lot of startups, this is an acceptable approach. For different corporations, I don't know how acceptable that would be, but for many, for the startups, it's like, hey, we're building this thing. We want you to be one of our first customers. To do so, we want to see at least a little money, a little commitment. Because to your point of like getting $1, right?
Right.
As opposed to
one of the phrases we use around here is the shortest path to money.
Shortest
right?
path
We
to
want to
money.
try to, because we're not going to ask for money up front, but we want to get most rapidly, because that's the proof, right? If you say, oh yeah, this is really valuable, but you're not willing to pay for it, well, then it's not that valuable.
That's right.
And so what we want to do is get really rapidly to, okay, make a commitment and put some money in. And, maybe that's, 2% of the total addressable market would be willing to pay for that first piece. Well, great. If those guys are willing to pay, get them to pay and prove that we can get that chunk. And then how do we get the next 5%? And then how do we get to 50% of the market? And then how do we get to 100% of the market would like it? So, that is also a bit of retraining organizationally, is to say, we'd like to make the perfect product, right? It needs to be 100% of everything. And then I can launch my sales force and we can really attack the market. No, how about we just get $1? Let's go get that first $1.
Right.
And, we can stick it up on the wall, like your favorite restaurant has. And we know, well, a customer came in and spent that $1 on the things we had. That's awesome. Now we can make more things. So that whole kind of idea to sign off latency is what I used to call it back before the Agile days, is that whole thing you described, right? With the very sad meeting to go, no, that's not it. So, we want to get to that's not it really fast. And then if, the organization said, well, this is it, but the customer says that's not it, we want to get to that really fast.
Oh, that's it, right? And that's really the challenge, is finding out your idea is terrible before you've spent too much money on it. Shelli, do you have, what do you got?
I think my only other question, Steve, was how easy is it to get in front of your customers, right? To do these demos, and how willing are they to invest the time?
Well, there's a really big advantage of the Rand McNally brand. So one of the things that I've loved about this job is that this brand is beloved. The folks who use our products, even if they're unhappy with the products, really still want us to win. And of course, the folks that are happy with the products, it just reinforces that really solid brand. So there's a lot of kind of trust and nostalgia built into the brand. So when we go to a customer and say, hey, would you talk to us about what we're making? They pretty much always say yes. It's really unusual. I mean, for plenty of startups, which I've done in the past, and companies who make a cool thing, but nobody really knows, oh, you're a part of the whole chain of stuff that makes my business go. I'd never heard of you before. Plenty of companies struggle with, hey, I'm XYZ Corp, and I want to talk to you about, what we put on your doctor's iPads. And they're like, go away, we don't have time for you. And at Rand McNally, they're like, oh, Rand McNally, how can we help? Nice. So, we leverage that. That's okay. We try not to abuse it, but we really do get a lot of market feedback, and there's plenty of good, bad, and ugly YouTube videos about people using our products. And we'll reach right out to those folks and say, hey, we saw you made a video, and we saw there's some things you didn't like. How about we work with you on what it would take so that you do like them?
Yeah.
What needs to change? And they're happy to talk to us.
That's
so
awesome.
that's a really great aspect of working at the company. And my job is to make sure we take advantage of that best we can to really make our products fit people's view of the brand.
Sure. Great.
Shelli, do you want to do the mentor question?
No, you go for it.
All right, I'll do it this time. I'm just stealing Shelli's work. This is actually how Shelli's the mastermind of everything. I just steal her stuff and take credit
Not true.
It's totally true. Everybody
knows. Well stolen is half done.
I love it. Would love to understand, you've had a lot of success in your life, and you've got a lot of leadership experience, and you're comfortable in going into places where change is imminent and there's going to be friction. So what are some of the things, how have you gotten to that point in your life? Where have you, obviously this is not stuff you learn in school. That's not things that you're going to, read in just a book. Right. So what is it? How have you gotten to this place in life, and who are some of the people that, you reached out to, or who have been kind of critical in helping you get to this level of confidence and capability?
So like most early careers, I did a bit of stumbling around, and, in the, kind of hardcore engineering space, electrical engineers and software people and what have you. There's a lot of folks who aren't really excellent people. They're really awesome at their work, and they work in small teams pretty well, but they're not really interested in or skilled at people leadership. So kind of early in my career, I was kind of pulled out as you got a little bit of people skills, so why don't we throw a team at you? And so some learn the hard way, and then a little bit of kind of liking that aspect to say, well, when I'm successful with the people side, the whole team gets better results. Mm-hmm. So let's build up some skills there. In the same way somebody says, hey, when I'm better at knowing design patterns, I can pick the better one. Okay, great. It's the same kind of thing on the people side. I at one point I was kind of switching from the work I'd started with to some new things, and said, all right, I need to hear from the experts. And I found like every book that existed at the time, so People Bear by DeMarco and Lister, and a discipline of software engineering, and whatever was the kind of current set of stuff out there to say, what do all these people have to say? And as it turns out, in a 300-page book, there might be a couple of pages of real people-related good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a little more goodness in a book called Peopleware, but in lots of the others, a little less so. But there was always something, and so tons of reading and little nuggets, and then practicing those. But I had the advantage of having a couple of good mentors. So along the way, folks who had some skill and taught me things like a manager needs to do as little as possible and everything that's necessary. So a bit of get out of the way and let your team do their job, but make sure you got their back and you're moving the roadblocks and making sure they can do their job. And after a period of meddling a little too much in teams, that was good advice. So some good folks in my path, as well as back kind of before the internet was much of a thing, I was a CompuServe guy, and there were groups led by now the kind of old masters of software thinking, that actually chatted with people, and you can learn a lot from somebody else doing something. Helped to have a stint in consulting where I met a lot of different managers at different firms doing a lot of different things. At one point, I was in a small town in Central Texas. There were like 3 or 4 big employers, which weren't really that big because it was a small town. So there weren't too many IT people. And we actually formed a working group across all of these firms and had a kind of weekly book club. We'd meet for lunch and talk to each other about the struggles we had, and some chapter in a book that about half of us had read. And just having that connection with other people doing the same thing was also huge. So I'm a fan of non-traditional ways of getting from here to there, and there's nothing like practice.
Mm-hmm.
So I spend a lot of my time now making sure I'm one-on-oneing all of my leaders, particularly the ones that have people. I've usually got outside folks who I'm doing some kind of on the side mentoring with that don't have something in their own organization, because you get asked a tough question and you're like, man, I'm not really sure how I would handle that. So I probably had to think that through because I'm going to run into that same situation myself. And so even working with somebody who you would presume to be more junior or less experienced, having to explain it really reinforces those skills. And sometimes you got to go learn something before you can tell them anything.
That's great. That's great. And I love the bit about doing the least amount necessary, but least amount possible, but everything that's necessary. Right.
Yep.
I think it's absolutely a true statement, especially at that manageable level where it's critical of like, you want to empower, give the opportunities, but at the same point in time, you got to catch the things that are falling through. Right. And that's, but it does, you catch fewer and fewer things as your team picks it up if you're really celebrating the victory. So, Steve, I think we could talk for another 3-4 days. I want to wrap up on that though. Really appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you spending the time and sharing your experience and your wisdom with us and with our listeners.
Love the chat. Thank you very much.
Awesome. We also wanted to thank you, our listeners. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us.
And if you'd like to receive new episodes as they're published, you can subscribe by visiting our website at dragonspears.com/podcast, or find us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode was sponsored by Dragon Spears and produced by Dante32.